Hello there, Mr. Herbert Scheibner. Thank you for being here at Trending Echoes. For those who don't know, Mr. Herbert Scheibner is the former Austrian Federal Minister of Defense, as well as President of the European Institute for Counterterrorism and Conflict Prevention. It's a pleasure having you here on the show.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. So, Mr. Herbert, looking at the Muslim Brotherhood and the violence that is present in Europe, how widespread is the Muslim Brotherhood actually in their presence in Europe, as well as notably, let's say, in Austria?
Well, as we see Muslim Brotherhood starting in Egypt in the 50s, from where many activists of them came to Europe in the late 50s and in the 60s, because at that time they saw Europe not as an area for actions, but as a safe ground to prepare actions for Egypt. And the situation has changed and afterwards when we faced a lot of Muslim migration, and especially also after the war in former Yugoslavia, in Bosnia and in Albania. Now the organization has established itself in many European countries, but also in the USA. They rarely appear there openly, but have gradually infiltrated existing Muslim organizations and also covertly founded new associations. With the immigration of Muslim populations, as I've said, these Muslim Brotherhood associations are trying to establish themselves as protectors and promoters of these people. Since there is no official Muslim Brotherhood organizations in Europe, but a large number of different organizations, the fight against radical structures is not easy either.
So as you said, they spread from Egypt to across the globe and have been having much more presence in Europe. What are the challenges or threats that they pose to societies and nation states by the Muslim Brotherhood and other radical groups?
Yes, the ultimate goal of these radical Islamist groups is the establishment of a caliphate in Europe, or at least, on the way to that, the establishment and expansion of Muslim parallel societies that can be controlled by these groups. The state authorities are rejected. The rules of conduct issued by the self-proclaimed religious leaders are for them above national law. European values are rejected, and the Muslim population is to be pressured to stay away from the majority society and not to integrate themselves. Of course, this creates space for conflicts which can lead to acts of violence, as we have seen during the past years.
Going into the founding texts and scriptures of the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamist groups, do these confined with the ideas of tolerance, or do they more so align with extremism from the point of view of an expert in the field?
Well, the problem is that most of the people don't know, for example, the principles of Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. But these principles of radical Islamist groups are incompatible. That's clear with our values. Religion is misused to achieve power political goals. Separation of church and state, rule of law, equal rights, prohibition of violence, tolerance towards dissenters are just some of our values against which these groups are fighting. But unfortunately, this is often very cleverly concealed. Social support, action against anti-Muslim hostility, and cultural activities are intended to hide the true intentions and, unfortunately, often lead to these organizations also receiving state financial support from the national countries, but also from the European Union.
So you could say that rather than confining with the principles of coexistence, they're rather portraying Islam as a form of you could say, violent or extremist thoughts, if that's the case, especially with Europe. I'd say, is the recognition of the Muslim Brotherhood widely accepted, or are there some groups that, or some countries, I would say, that do not really recognize the existence of such a threat?
Well, we had the problem in the past that most of the countries and authorities, they were not aware of the danger, and they believed what was said, that this is only a social movement, that they want to support Muslim migrants and so on, and they want to fight against any pressure against the Muslim population. And for that they got funds to organize that. If you go deeper inside of their real aims, you see that this is not the case. They want to build up parallel societies or counter societies to establish Muslim society, but in a way they think what is
It's
Muslim orientated. And even they put a lot of pressure to the moderate Muslim society in Europe. And we have to be aware of that. And I think during the last years that has been changed. So even the political level is much more careful now regarding this issue.
Yeah, so the political stance on it is more aware of the group's existence. And looking at the studies, the Western studies, how do they address the extremism and terrorism of the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, there are a number of studies that describe the danger of political Islam and Muslim Brotherhood, but unfortunately, some of this research has not been taken very seriously in the past, as we have discussed before. Some of the researchers in question were heavily criticized by the organizations of political Islam and labeled as hostile to Muslim. Some have also been physically threatened and need police protection. And as a result of that, there are only a few scientists who want to do research on these fields, especially the young researchers. However, the Hamas terroristic attack in 2023, the sharp increase in the number of terrorist attacks in Europe, and the increasing acts of violence by radical Islamists have greatly changed the awareness of the problem in most of the European countries. There are now increasing calls for a ban on political Islam. The financial machinations are now also more closely controlled, and Muslim Brotherhood and similar organizations are therefore coming under the increasing pressure. But it has to do more, and I think research and all the research institutions who are dealing with that issue should get more support than before.
Stricter policies should be addressed towards these groups. And looking at the operational and intellectual links between the Muslim Brotherhood and traditional extremist groups, what is the connection between those two?
Well, they have one strategy that they say they are on the one hand there are the terrorists, for example Al-Qaeda, Daesh, and on the other hand we are only moderate supporters and representatives of Muslims and against the terrorists. And that's not the case, because the goals of all of them are the same. The main goal is the establishment of a caliphate, or at least an Islamization of societies. The methods possibly differ depending on the organization and their strategy, from participation in national elections, as in some Arab countries, to the attempt to infiltrate private and state structures or influence them in their favor, until up to violent or violent activism. The boundaries then to terrorist acts are often fluid. Hamas is again a good example for this. As the Palestinian wing of the Muslim Brotherhood, It presents itself as a representative and promoter of the Palestinian people. In reality, they use the people, or they misuse the people, for their own purposes, use them as living shields, and have withheld billions in aid from the people to finance the luxury lives of the Hamas leaders.
So you could say that they employ psychological weaponry, quote unquote, or even leveraging, let's say, religion as a weapon for their part through, let's say, recruitment methods, face-to-face recruitment methods that slowly seed the ideas of extremism, terrorism, or even this radical perspective of Islam into unsuspecting individuals of society, thus recruiting them into their groups.
Yes, they have a clear strategy to show the Muslim people that they are the only supporters of them and all the others are against, and therefore they try to catch them. But on the other hand, we see that they are misusing them. They misuse money, they misuse political areas, and so on.
Yeah, so they use this misinterpretation of their religion to basically garner support, attack other groups, Islamic groups, and using recruitment methods. Looking at the 21st century that we are in right now, the internet has played a vast role and is used daily by us and by the most of society. Social media has been a tool of daily use for most of the younger generations, and even some older generations have been getting into it. Looking at the political stances of that, social medias like Twitter, or formerly, now X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, arguably WhatsApp, those are tools that have been popping up more and more in research regarding the recruitment methods of the Muslim Brotherhood and other terrorist groups. Could you elaborate more on that? How are those platforms used to basically recruit new members into their cause?
Well, as part of the older generation, I'm very conservative in the communication, so I'm not on social media, but it's the case and it's reality that also radical organizations and movement from wherever they are coming from, right-wing, left-wing, and also Islamic associations, they are increasingly using new media and means of communication for their own purposes. They are often ahead of the state institutions in this respect, and that's also a huge problem. There must be better initiatives to prevent the spread of hate messages via social media, what we see every day. But nevertheless, as a member of last generations, one should not forget that radical mosques, misguided religion education, and associations that reinforce the narratives of hate preachers also contribute to radicalization and must therefore be combated comprehensively. So we see that radical organizations like Muslim Brotherhood, they are hybrid acting, and we have to react also in a hybrid way, not only facing one method, but see all the instruments and tools they are using, and we have to create a counter-narrative on that.
Yes, because this hybrid threat that you mentioned, as you said, there is the physical aspect and there is the digital aspect of these recruitment methods. Arguably, Twitter, before the shift towards X, has taken heat for its contribution to the Capitol riots in the US. Some call that far-right extremism, and some contend that it's just domestic terrorism shielded by the thought of just Republicans. So that's shifting away a little bit from the narratives of Islam. But is there a tie between how those groups could be easily seeded to storm the Capitol as it happened in 2021, and other cases of group riots and violence that is occurring maybe in Europe or other parts of the world?
Yes, of course. We see also that a lot of groups, radical groups, they are connected. Even if you're surprised why a left wing and a right wing group, they are cooperating in some ways. So therefore, it has to be clear that there is no good and bad radical movement. All radical movement, all kind of extremism is against our society and has to be there has to be an opponent and fight against them, no matter from where these radical movements are coming. Because in Europe, for example, we are very active in fighting against right-wing radicalism. And that's important. It's an important issue. Therefore, we don't have really right-wing extremism and violence in a broader way. But we have to do the same concentration and the same activities against left-wing and also radical Islamist movements like Muslim Brotherhood.
Yes, and looking at the recruitment schemes used by the Muslim Brotherhood and other terrorist groups, what could we as people do to basically avoid or try to not fall victims to it?
Well, even there is resistance, it is absolutely necessary to point out the danger posed by political Islam and to develop measures to combat all the radical currents, as I've mentioned. In addition, it's also important to show the Muslim population in Europe, especially the youth, that they are not excluded from European society, but to show them the possibilities and opportunities for positive integration. Social media should also be used in a modern form to neutralize the messages of this Islamist movement.
So we've seen in the part of governments, we've seen that institutions such as the European Union have been taking a more proactive role in deterring misinformation, disinformation, or even propaganda from spreading on social media platforms or even through the internet. What could governments and other nation states learn from the examples of, let's say, the EU in deterring this digital threat, as well as how could they basically raise awareness about the Muslim Brotherhood as a whole? Could initiatives be taken? Could news be spread through, of course, news channels or even through their own platforms?
Well, I think it is necessary that the countries are working together, that they share the informations they have, and to enhance the awareness about the threats and the danger of those groups. Because we see the Muslim Brotherhood and related organizations, they are working together very closely, although there are something quite different in their work and in their aims. But when it comes to a search for money, then they are working together properly. And we see, especially in the European Union, that there is not enough, control system for the funds the European Union has offered. A lot of organizations that we see then, they have an Islamic or radical background. They are asking for money, then there is an investigation and that yes, this was misused, this money was misused, you have to pay it back. They close the associations and open another, and maybe also in another country. And if there is not exchange of information, then this is possible.
So a point that I want to expand on, if possible. So you talked about how the groups are not always unified in their aims, essentially. So could you elaborate on that? Are there different groups with different goals per se about how they should take their actions or how they want to achieve set goals?
We see that the radical institutions in general and when they are related to Muslim Brotherhood and political Islam, They are very flexible, and they are clever because they don't promote violence openly in Europe, because they know then they would get a lot of troubles. And when they advertise or give informations in English or in German, it's totally different to what they say in Arabic. And only very few of researchers or authorities in Europe, they know Arabic language. And that's part of the problem, for example. We had a big case law in Europe where they have to stop the investigation because they had a tremendous of volume of information in Arabic language, but no interpreters. So it was not possible to interpret the text, and they had to close the whole case. And that's really a situation we cannot accept for the future.
So you could say that language barrier is one of the key issues that is deterring or not encouraging European countries from really investigating or trying to look into the Muslim Brotherhood. And as you said before, international cooperation should be emphasized between, let's say, Europe, the Middle East, or even Arabic-speaking countries to try and combat such threats to different regions across the globe. Expanding on that, if we're looking at the future of the Muslim Brotherhood, their current presence, past presence, and even the road looking forward, from your perspective, how do you envision the group's future?
Well, it is that we hope that the current willingness to take active actions against radical organizations will continue. But above all, it's important to stop the financing of them. International networking, as we have discussed, and upgrading the research in this area is absolutely necessary in order to be able to lay the foundations for further measures. Examples of lived tolerance between religions, such as in the UAE, should be better advertised. For example, this marvelous and signal and symbol of tolerance, the Abrahamic family house, where the clear message is there is one God we believe on, and so therefore, and it's the same God. So there is no need for discussions, no need for threats, no need for violence. That should be better advertised, because only a few people know about this wonderful symbol. And ultimately, and that's for me very important, it would also be a task of politics to work for the solution of the open global political questions, such as, for example, the future of the Palestinian people, because all these conflicts are misused by these extremist organizations. And this is, to my mind, the only way to prevent terrorist organizations from abusing the suffering of the populations for their own purposes.
Thank you so much for this wonderful discussion, Mr. Herbert. This was such an insightful look at the Muslim Brotherhood and their impact on the world, as well as the violence that they threaten the globe. So thank you once more for this insightful look.
It was my pleasure.
The pleasure is all mine.